podcast number 5. Okay, so this podcast we are going to be talking about our basic concepts of ABA, the foundation knowledge with lots of terms. This one is going to be super term heavy, which is great if this is where you need to study. If you are wanting a refresher or if you're wanting an intro, both will apply for that exam. Having a good solid foundation of these terms is going to be essential into your studying journey, guys. Because if you don't know what these are, you're not going to know what all the other way harder concepts mean. And you can really break them down when you understand these basic concepts, understand what these keywords mean. There's a lot of terms and it's really overwhelming. So I am here to solve that problem for you. I'm going to help you break all this down. There's not going to be too many clear task list items that we're going to be working on because I picked and pulled from all over. Next couple podcasts, I'll be able to clearly tell you where we're going. So I wanted to build a solid foundation. I went through all of chapter 2 and just really worked on figuring out what we need to know before we move forward. How do we understand stimulus class if we don't understand what a stimulus and a stimuli are? Things like that. So I'm here to give you all the answers. I'm here to help you. This is the channel, Your ABA Help, and I am Sarah, your BCBA, and I am so excited to help you guys today. We are going to be going through each term, definition, a breakdown of that definition, aka how I remember it, what makes most sense to me, taking all that sciencey stuff out of it, clinical example and a real life example. I'll try to provide both, but if one example explains it, we're going to do the example, we're going to move on, so I'm not wasting your time. And then at the end, we are going to have a quiz. I'm going to do it a little bit of a flashcard style, so tell me what this is, what is this, what is that, to make sure you're remembering this information. So I would definitely recommend giving this video a like and a subscribe, sneak that in there. But giving it a like so that way you can save it and come back to it and just skip to that timestamp at the end where you can quiz yourself and see what you know, what you don't know. Make sure you got your foundation nice and solid. If you're on the podcast, I would definitely recommend just taking note of the time where that quiz starts and that timestamp. So that way you are prepared and you can just jump back to it while you're driving, and that can be just part of your routine of studying until you've got those down solid. And then another great thing that we're going to be doing, so we've got, the terms, definitions, all that. We're also going to be doing a lot of comparing and contrasting. So there's some similar terms in here that can be really hard to differentiate between in questions and also just in definition. What is the difference between a behavior and response? Let's talk about it. To start us off, I'm going to go ahead and list off all the terms that we'll be talking about in this podcast, just so you know what to expect. And then if you're just popping in and jumping around on podcasts, okay, this podcast is going to have this term. Let me listen to figure out what it is. So this podcast is going to be a 2-parter for sure. There's a ton of terms. We're about 2/3 of the way through with those concepts and terms. But I don't want to rush anything. I want to make sure you have plenty of time to digest all this information for us to do a quiz. So I'll be back next week with the rest of this part 2 for you. And we'll do a quiz at the end of that part 2 as well, covering what we talk about in the next podcast and everything as far as this podcast goes as well. So we can make sure we've got it all nice and solid. And on YouTube, I'm going to put some timestamps in for you guys to kind of be able to jump around. So if you're I just need to know what a response class is, I can give you a timestamp so you can just jump to that. So that way you're not having to skip around, hop around, and all of that. Make it easier because studying is already hard enough. Our terms are behavior response, response class, response topography, function, topography, temporal relations, contingency, socially mediated, repertoire, environment, antecedent, consequence, ABC data, reinforcement, reinforcer, punishment, punisher, extinction, stimuli, stimulus. That will be the kind of general overview of what we're going to talk about. I picked and pulled from all the different sections. We have classical conditioning, operant, responder, or allness. We've got a lot. We've got the classes in there. So I picked and pulled. So we're going to push all this together, talk about it, and then I'm going to break it down and go even further in the next couple of podcasts. Okay, guys? Cool. First up is behavior. Definition of behavior is that portion of an organism interaction with its environment that involves movement of some part of the organism. Behavior includes movements of the muscles that aren't seen. Something important to notice about that definition right off the bat is you don't have to see every behavior. Behaviors can happen in here. Behaviors can be my mouth closed and my tongue moving, still a behavior. My breakdown of that definition, this is the classic thing you hear when you're studying for the RBT exam, when you're studying for your big exam, dead man test. Can a dead man do it? This is one where you're going to be sitting here questioning yourself like, wait, can a dead man sit in a chair? So everything that humans do, including how they move, what they think, see, feel, all behaviors. And Cooper specifically says that thinking is a behavior, guys. So don't let that trip you up. Thinking is a behavior. Things you can't see, they're all behaviors. So dead man test, you guys know what this is. If a dead man can do it, it's not a behavior. The trick about a behavior is you have to be interacting with the environment. So just laying there, not moving, not existing, just dead, not a behavior. Everything else, behavior. So some examples of behavior are opening a snack, asking for a cookie, rolling a car, moving my tongue in my mouth, firing neurons in my brain to think. This matters because BCBAs, we have to be behavioral. So call back to the 7 dimensions. We need to make sure that we're targeting behaviors and that we're targeting behaviors that can be changed. Up next is response. Definition of response is action of an organism, effector. An effector is an organ at the end of an efferent nerve. Yeah, that's the definition, Cooper, guys. So each time we engage in behavior is a response. So behavior is the big term. Response is that single instance. You can only have one response one time. Let me break it down for you guys. So behaviors are everything that we do, how we interact with the environment. A response is how we respond in that moment. Response is going to be one second, one instant, whereas behavior is kind of that overarching term, that umbrella of all of our responses, going to be our behavior. So for response, no two responses will ever be the same. Responses are one unit of time. Behavior is an umbrella term for all responses. Example, so writing your name. Somebody says, teacher comes by and says, write your name on your paper. You write your name on your paper. That's your response. Now, every single time you write your name on your paper, it's going to be a different response. And, there's going to be variations on how you write your name and everything. Even if you wrote the exact same, it's a different unit of time, different response. So writing your name, you write your name is a response. You engage in the behavior. If you wrote your name again, that would be a new response. All the different ways you wrote your name would be a response class. So we're going to talk about response classes. Response class, guys, the definition is a group of responses with the same function. Let me break it down. Behaviors look different, but all result in the same thing. So this can be kind of confusing when you're first trying to understand what it is, but once you get some examples, you're going to get this, okay? So for response class, the example here in Cooper was opening a bag of chips. So for opening a bag of chips, each time you open it is going to be a response. Hungry, you open a bag of chips, that's a response. That behavior of opening is going to be your overarching. So you have all your behaviors of opening chips, response, opening that bag. Your response class is going to be those variations in how you open that bag. Your fingers are going to be slightly different. Your hands are going to be slightly differently placed. Your other hand's going to be slightly different every single time. So each time you open that bag, it's going to be a different response. And the response class is going to be those variations in your hand and the way you open that bag. So same thing as writing your name. The variations in the way you write your name every single time you write it, or especially when you sign your name, those are all response classes. So we're going to group up all those behaviors together. That will give us our response class, the way you write your name. Response class, the way you open your bag. Response class of the way you say hi to people. If we're trying to get someone's attention, there's different ways we can do it, right? We can yell, hey, you can yell their name, you can shout, you could snap, you could tap their shoulder, you could wave, all that stuff. So that would be a response class for getting someone's attention for a greeting. They all result in the same consequence, different behaviors, different looks, all slight variations, right? So you've got your behavior of getting somebody's attention. Your response would be each instance that you're trying to get their attention. So, I saw Susie on the street, I said, hey, that's my response. And my response classes and variations of the ways I could have said hi or that I do say hi. You guys got that, right? Solid. Okay, I'm gonna throw one more in there for you as far as response goes. So response topography. The definition refers to the physical form or shape of a behavior. So response topography, all you need to know is it's how it looks. What you see is the topography. It's that simple. Don't overthink it. What you see is the answer. Example here is a child punching the bag in the clinic. So they're just punching a bean bag because they're so angry. The response topography is going to be how it looks. Closed fists, forcefully pushing it towards the bag. You're making contact. For that example of opening a bag of chips, it's going to be the hand grabbing, the opening, the pulling, what you're physically seeing that person do. We don't care about their motivation, why, and that is literally just what we see with our eyeballs. Same thing with writing a name. It's going to be them holding that pencil, the way they move their hand, the way they move their arm. It's going to be exactly what we see. And then we're going to kind of talk about the opposite, which is function. So Cooper didn't have a good function definition. It would be function behavioral interventions. So for function, what we're just going to focus on is the why. Why is that person doing it? What is their reasoning? What's the purpose that is serving for them? So I'm sure you guys know from studying from your RBT, or if you're just completely new to this, it's going to be the acronym SEAT for functions of behavior, sensory, escape, attention, tangible. So we'll go a lot more into these functions and, why, who, where, what of all of those later on in another chapter. But for now, I want to just give some brief examples. So for our, writing your name, why is that person writing their name? They might be escaping a reprimand from their teacher. Maybe their teacher will yell at them if they don't have their name on their paper, so they're escaping that experience. So if we're opening a bag of chips, maybe you want to access a tangible. Maybe you like that sensory crunch and you're needing something to, satisfy that sensory need in your jaw. It could be attention because your mom's going to yell at you if you eat another bag of chips. That's why you're opening those chips. It could be for escape. You don't want to do your homework, so you want to eat some chips instead. It gives you another 5 minutes of stalling, right? So we have function-based interventions and topography-based interventions. Cooper specifically states that we should be focusing heavily on function-based, and obviously I agree with this, because function-based will help give the functional communication training in DRAs, so the alternative behaviors purpose. If we are doing function-based interventions, this serves the purpose for that person. So if we are trying to teach them a better way to do something or how to do something more appropriately or communicate their needs, we've got to know what they want, what's their why, what's their motivation, right? Motivation is the most important thing in the world. So we got to know what they're doing it for, and that's what we get from a function-based intervention. Whereas a topography intervention, we're just intervening purely based on what we see. So a good example here that I love to kind of clarify and drive a nail in its coffin here is, imagine if our intervention was every time the person says fire, they need to sit in a chair. Maybe they in class will yell fire to try to get attention, right? So we just have a topography-based intervention. They yell fire, sit in a chair. Now imagine if there was actually a fire, even if they were at home or wherever, and we taught them that if you say fire, you sit in a chair. That's not great. Now, whereas if we did a function intervention and it was to escape work, we can work on that function and teach that skill a little bit better and give them a more appropriate way. So that way we can reserve the word fire for real emergencies and teach them, actually, you're wanting attention or you're wanting to escape work. Here's how you do it. Ask for a break, raise your hand, stuff like that. So if you're in a clinic or you work for a BCBA or a company that does just topography interventions, I would definitely explore some function-based interventions and start really understanding how these 4 functions of behaviors apply, because this could be huge on Cooper and it should be huge in the field at this point. I'd be shocked if there's a company that's purely doing topography intervention still, because we're missing out on so many important learning opportunities and skills that way. And then another little keynote I would put in here, it's not a specific term or definition in Cooper, but temporal relations, or just temporal, all that means is time. Temporal equals time. Remember it with those 2 T's, T, temporal, T, time. Relations is just the relationship or the relation to other things. The relationship that the response has in time. So when did they do it? What time did they do it? What relation does it have? So was it before or after the teacher said, write your name? What time did it happen? It's gonna be temporal relation. Temporal relation comes and goes all throughout the text, and you'll have a temporal relation for the punishment consequence, things like that. So you'll see it pop up. Just know what it is. Don't try to remember what a temporal relation for a consequence, response is. Just know temporal relation, you know what a consequence is. You can figure it out. Solid. Up next, we got contingency. Definition for contingency. Refers to the dependent and or temporal relation between operant behavior and its controlling variables. All this means is the relationship between the variables and what happens. If this happens, that happens. So we have contingencies all the time. If you don't realize it, they're there constantly. It's just if A happens, B happens. If A doesn't happen, then B doesn't happen. That's all it means. So some examples, there's a contingency in place where a child will only do his homework if the TV's on and he can watch SpongeBob while he does his homework. That's a little contingency he has. Or like a first then statement. So you're setting a contingency. So like parents love using the contingency. First you eat your dinner, then you can have dessert. That's a contingency. So like for me, going on a run is going to be contingent on my life being in danger. Being able to read a book is contingent on there being light in the room. Things like that. It can be an environment. It could be serious things, not serious things. All of it. We use contingencies all the time in ABA. Right, and then socially mediated is another term you're going to see. Socially mediated on its own is another person presents the antecedent stimulus and or the consequence of the behavior. All that means is another person is interacting with the behavior of the other person. For socially mediated, it has to be 2 people involved. There has to be somebody giving the antecedent or the consequence of that behavior for the other person. Examples of that, my manding is socially, or my requesting is socially mediated if I am asking another person for a cup of coffee. Or, if they're giving me the cup of coffee, reinforce my manding, that's socially mediated. Socially mediated escape would be me looking at my teacher saying, I need a break, and them helping me get that break. It literally just involves another person. You're going to see socially mediated all throughout the text as well, just like temporal relations. It's a reoccurring term. Just know, 2 people involved. It doesn't have to be anything specific. It's just another person is helping deliver the antecedent or consequence for that person's behavior. Solid. All right, up next we got repertoire. This one, I'm not going to say that word again because I'm really bad at saying guessing. So there's 2 definitions according to Cooper. The first one is all the behaviors that a person can do. The second one is a person's collection of knowledge and skills relevant to a particular setting or a task. The way this term can apply can be your repertoire in school. All your different behaviors that you use in school are going to be different than what you use at home. So you have your ability to have all these different behaviors grouped together. So listening to teacher, sitting in the chair, writing your name, a whole bunch of different behaviors, right? So that could be your repertoire related to the setting. Your repertoire related to behavior, so eating. It could be, your ability to pick up a fork to bring food to your mouth, use your fingers to bring food to your mouth, your ability to make all the food, things like that. Repertoire is never going to be something that you understand what's all in that category. It's all going to be dependent on the person, their learning history, what they've learned in order to make food, eat food in that example, what they've learned to do in school, their repertoire. It's just the collection of everything that person can do. The way I kind of look at this repertoire is going to be that overarching term, then you have behavior. Is going to be all those behaviors in that repertoire. The repertoire is going to have multiple behaviors and multiple response classes, right? Because you can open a bag of chips different ways, you can open, a jar of pickles different ways. Different response classes are going to exist in that repertoire because it is all those things you can do in relation to a setting, events, behaviors, that fun stuff. All right, and then up next we've got environment. Definition of environment is the full set of circumstances that the organism exists. So the breakdown of this one is the physical world is anything around the person. Anything in this room to me is the environment. Any chair, any pencil, anything that you see around you, environment. I am part of the environment, so if somebody else walks in, I am part of the environment. So behavior analysts manipulate the environment. That is ABA. That's our entire job, is manipulating the environment to have the desired outcomes. A big thing that I hope you all learn is how to manipulate the environment for antecedent interventions and find ways to prevent behaviors from ever happening by manipulating the environment is going to be huge key in being a good behavior analyst. For example, we have a child that runs out of room a lot, it's a loper. You can manipulate the environment in order to decrease the opportunities for the behavior to ever even occur, to make it more inclusive for learning. So an example is putting the child on the other side of the room so they aren't right next to the classroom door. Moving your body to block the door, not blocking their movement, because we don't want to do that, guys, but blocking it in the sense of they're not seeing it. It's not available to them because they need to be in class. It's not safe for them to run out of the classroom, things like that. And then some real life examples of manipulating the environment is placing the cookies out of eyesight in the pantry, because if you don't see them, you're less likely to eat them. It's just manipulating that behavior. Another example is you want to sleep through the night, or you want to sleep better, you want to sleep in later. So you close your curtains so that way there's not light coming in the morning. You're manipulating your environment for desired outcomes. Antecedent. The environmental conditions are stimulus changes that exist or occur prior to the behavior of interest. The breakdown of this one is anything before the behavior. We'll talk about ABC data in a minute and kind of break that down, but anything before the behavior. There's always going to be an antecedent to a behavior. So we're going to use our determinism brain and know nothing comes out of the blue. There's always something that happened to cause that behavior. Whether we can see it or we understand it, it's still there. So when you're figuring out antecedents to behaviors, we're going to talk a lot more about this when we get to that section of the task list. Just understand it's anything that happens before the behavior that were of interest. I'll give you some examples on ABC data. And then consequence is a stimulus change that follows a behavior of interest. What happens right after that behavior, right? So an important thing to know about consequence is consequences do not have to be a bad thing. It's literally just what occurs after the behavior, and that's all you need to know for consequence. After the behavior, it's not a bad thing. Consequence is not always going to time out. Consequence could be getting a sucker. It could be winning the lottery. It could be anything. Good, bad, mediocre, it doesn't matter. Keep in mind, don't let that trip you up. I'm going to give you some ABC data examples. So I'll put them on the screen if you're watching it on YouTube. But if you're on the podcast, just listen closely. You got this. A big thing to understand about ABC data is it's going to be the behavior that we're doing is going to be what we're targeting across the board. When we are looking at multiple instances of this behavior, it's always going to be the same behavior. I'm going to give you some situations, A, B, C. Antecedent, behavior, consequence. Ready? We are looking at little Johnny's flopping. It's going to be flopping in the kitchen. It's going to be flopping, in this room. It's going to be flopping is going to be the behavior every single time. Antecedent is what's going to be happening before that flopping. Consequence is going to be what's happening after that flopping. So in order to take ABC data and understand your antecedent consequences, you have to know what your behavior of interest is. You can't just go in and start trying to pick out antecedents to random behaviors. It's not going to make sense. And also, the behavior has to be that person's behavior. So when you're doing ABC data, it's not going to be somebody else's behavior that you're looking at. It's going to be the behavior that you're paying attention to. Let me give you some examples. If we are looking at little Johnny's jumping on a trampoline and a little kid gets in there, the behavior is not going to be the little kid getting the trampoline unless we were focusing on that little kid's behavior of getting the trampoline, but we're not. We're focused on Johnny. Johnny is jumping on the trampoline. That's our behavior. What was the antecedent to that jumping? He probably had to get into the trampoline, or maybe he was placed in the trampoline by an adult. And then the consequence, he begins jumping. And you can also look at the problem behaviors there. So let's say little Johnny runs away. We want to decrease or change that runaway. So we're looking at the antecedent. So the antecedent to the runaway, little Johnny was given a demand. Johnny ran away. Consequence, the teacher followed, or teacher didn't follow, or teacher replaced the demand. Teacher stood there. And then for ABC data, it can also be our behavior. So I'm walking, I stub my toe, I say ow. So antecedent is I'm walking, behavior, I stub my toe. Consequence, I yell ow. That can be ABC data as well. Understanding and practicing those are going to be so crucial to your job and your success as a behavior analyst. Being able to understand the antecedent and pick it out will help you understand MO, ST, function, all of that. So I definitely recommend practicing that one. We'll definitely work on it in some of the quiz stuff that we're going to do. Oh, and then another thing I wanted to point out here is that on the task list, this is where you start to see define and give examples. And I think that is incredibly important to notice, because now you need to be able to explain it and put it into those story problems and give me examples. Another important note, task list B, guys, this is a huge part of the exam, if not one of the biggest parts. This is going to have so many terms, it's going to have so much information, so really take your time on section B. Let's go ahead and do the quiz for what we talked about today. So like I said, I'm going to do a flashcard style. So I'm just going to ask you the term. You're going to tell me in your car, wherever you're at, what that term is, and I'm going to give you the answer. I'm going to do it in my breakdown way. I'm not going to have you guys say the definition, because you guys know at this point, people have been watching. I do not believe you need to know these definitions, but you do need to know what they are, the keywords, and how they're different from each other. So that's what we're going to focus on. Great. So tell me, what is function? So for function, the biggest thing is the why. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? For functions of behavior, the acronym is SEAT: sensory, escape, attention, and tangible. What makes a behavior socially mediated? Yep, it's going to be when it involves another person. For the antecedent or the consequence, it's going to be delivered by that second person. Give me an example of a contingency. Yep, so if A happens, B happens. If A doesn't happen, then B doesn't happen. It's those rules, those first thens. This has to happen. In order for that to happen, is going to be contingency. It doesn't just have to be AB, it could be ABC. Like the three-term contingency is ABC, antecedent, behavior, consequence. Keep that in mind. Give me an example of an antecedent. Yeah, so anything before a behavior. So, turning on a light, you're going to walk into the room, or get more specific and saying, putting hand near light switch, making contact with light switch. Behavior is turning on the light. Consequence is looking up at the light, thinking, wow. So anything before that behavior, you can get as specific as you need to when you're looking at these three-term contingency. When you're looking at these three-term contingencies and trying to figure out functions, that all depend on the situation. Tell me, what is the difference between a behavior and a response? Yeah, so behavior is going to be kind of overarching our behavior of writing our name out, versus a response is that single unit of time, that one occurrence that you did of writing your name out. Cool. Another example that we could come up with, say, eating. So we have our eating behavior, holding a fork behavior. And that one instance is going to be when you bring that fork to your mouth or hold that fork, or, eat. Physically eat is going to be your response. Give an example of a repertoire of behaviors for getting dressed. Okay, so an example for repertoire for getting your clothes on would be your grabbing your clothes behaviors, your ability to turn your clothes inside out to tell the difference between a shirt and pants, and that receptive identification, your ability to match your socks, things like that are gonna be your repertoire behaviors. It's a huge, endless repertoire, really. It all depends on person to person as well. Nobody's repertoires are gonna be the same. Repertoires are all dependent on people's reinforcement history. So what's been reinforced for me in my repertoire of getting dressed is going to be different than yours. So a good example is some people know how to tie a tie and others don't. It's all going to depend on their reinforcement history. So for that person, tying a tie is in their repertoire for getting dressed. It's not mine. So tell me, what does the ABC and ABC data stand for? Yeah, antecedent, behavior, consequence. All right, I'm going to give you guys some story problems. You ready? So I'm a BCBA and I'm targeting little Susie's refusal to walk. So little Susie refuses to walk to gym class because she hates it, right? So we're trying to figure out what about gym class does she hate? Is it the walk? Is it the teacher? Is it what we're saying to her? We don't know. I can't figure out the function of Susie's refusal to walk. It just happens when she's going to gym class. That's all I know. So one week I am going to have Susie's therapist take data, ABC data on her refusal to walk so that way I can better understand the function. So I'm going to give you an example and you're going to put the A, B, and the C in the ABC data. Got it? Little Susie is lining up with her class. The teacher turns off the class light, says, all right, class, let's go. They're walking down the hallway. Little Susie flops down and refuses to stand. The teacher says, Susie, let's go. Susie refuses to go. The rest of the class goes and the therapist waits behind with her while little Susie sits there for 20 minutes. Cool. All right, ABC to that. You ready? So the behavior that we're tracking here is Susie's refusal to walk. That would go in our behavior column, Susie's refusal to walk. So the antecedent to the refusal to walk would be the class is walking down the hallway, right? So they're all walking. That's what happened right prior to it. If we wanted to include that the teacher said, class, let's go, we could include that if it's close enough in time. It would kind of depend on the situation. But we've got the class walking in a line together to gym. Behavior, Susie refuses to walk. Consequence, the class leaves her behind and the therapist waits with her. So we look at this over a course of a week and we can start to pick up on patterns. Maybe it's just with this therapist, or maybe it's because the whole class leaves her behind and some other teachers don't. So sometimes she flops, sometimes she doesn't. You can pick on different things with the ABC data. We are teaching little Susie to put her pants on. She's really struggling with this skill. So I am going to observe to see what is going on. Like, why isn't she getting this? Like, what are we missing here? So when I go and observe for a couple of days, I notice that little Susie puts on her pants different every single day. She does something different with her hands. Sometimes she, waddles or she balls up the pants to put them on. Sometimes she does one leg at a time. It's also different. But in the end, she does get her pants on. However, the way we collect her data, it shows that sometimes she gets it wrong because she's not doing this one specific way. But in the end, pants are on. I'm happy. What's this example of? Yes, would be a great example of response class. So her response of putting pants on is different every time, but it serves the same function of getting those pants on. Solid. Cool. I hope you guys liked this little review. I hope you did good. I hope you feel like you've got all this information and it's stored in your brain and you're feeling confident. I'll see you guys next week. It's gonna be great. Don't forget to subscribe so that way you can get notified when I upload on Sundays. Bye guys.